Ancient monuments were the battlefields of a silent war. We are uncovering the untold rivalries between ancient architects, a story of genius designs that sparked conflict. This journey reveals the personal grudges and professional sabotage hidden within our world's most iconic structures. You will learn how competition, not just collaboration, built the ancient world. We will explore why brilliant minds clashed over blueprints and how an emperor's pride could topple a master builder. What forgotten ambition do you think is carved into the stones of the past? Two master builders stand before the pharaoh, each holding a model of a pyramid. Their eyes are locked in a contest of wills that would span generations. This was the true nature of architectural rivalry in the ancient world, a complex dance of ego, innovation, and political patronage. It went far beyond simple personal dislike. This was a struggle for immortality itself, where winning a royal commission meant your name would be carved into history forever. The Roman historian Pliny the Elder once wrote that there is always something new out of Africa, a nod to the relentless flow of competitive ideas that emerged from such contests. These conflicts were not merely about constructing a larger monument. They were about building smarter, introducing revolutionary engineering principles, applying more sophisticated mathematics, and daring to realize artistic visions that stretched the boundaries of what was considered possible. The skyline of an ancient city was, in essence, a public scoreboard for these high-stakes games. What force could drive a person to risk their reputation, their fortune, even their life for a single project? It was the chance to achieve a legacy that would outlast empires. This foundational understanding of rivalry sets the stage for our first great conflict, a story of clashing ambition buried in the sands of Egypt. The royal court of Pharaoh Djoser was a crucible of ambition. A single goal consumed the kingdom: to construct a tomb that would defy time itself. At the center of this monumental effort stood Imhotep, the pharaoh's vizier and chief architect. He envisioned a structure that reached for the gods, a pyramid built in giant steps. This was not merely a new design, it was a complete rejection of the flat, rectangular mastaba tombs that had been the standard for centuries. Such a radical vision was bound to create enemies. Historical records hint at a powerful, though unnamed, rival within the court. This conservative architect represented the old guard, the masters of tradition who viewed Imhotep's step design as structurally unsound and spiritually dangerous. He likely argued that such innovation was an affront to the gods, a gamble that could jeopardize the pharaoh's entire journey into the afterlife. To build this was to risk divine wrath. But Imhotep was more than a visionary, he was a revolutionary engineer. His true genius was not just in the shape of the pyramid, but in the very substance of it. He moved beyond sun-baked mud bricks and pioneered the use of cut stone, carefully shaping and stacking small blocks to create the first major stone building in history. This technique provided the strength and permanence his daring design demanded. The step pyramid at Saqqara was his ultimate reply to his critics, a silent but thunderous argument carved in limestone. Its success did more than secure a pharaoh's legacy. It shattered architectural conventions forever. Imhotep proved that innovation could triumph over tradition, establishing the architect's role as a revolutionary thinker. This victory in the sands of Egypt sent a powerful message across the ancient world, a message that would soon be heard in the bustling city-states of Greece. Egypt's stone mountains did not simply stand in the desert. They sent a powerful message across the sea. When Greek travelers and merchants returned home with stories of these impossible structures, they sparked a cultural confrontation. This was no longer a personal feud between two architects. It was a fundamental clash of philosophies, a silent war of ideals fought with columns and capitals. Egypt built for the gods and the god-king. Their architecture was a language of absolute power, designed to overwhelm the individual and project an image of eternal, unshakable order. The goal was to make a person feel small, to reinforce the divine authority of the pharaoh. This was architecture as a monument to eternity itself. The Greek response was a revolution in thought. They looked at those colossal works and asked a different question. What if a building was designed not to dwarf humanity, but to celebrate it? This idea was crystallized in the words of the philosopher Protagoras, who declared that man is the measure of all things. The Greeks built for the human spirit. Their temples, like the Parthenon, were not meant to crush you with scale, but to lift you with harmony. They achieved this through an obsession with mathematical precision and optical illusion. Every line that appears straight is actually a subtle curve. Every column swells gently in the middle to counter the eye's tendency to see it as concave. This was not just building, it was a profound expression of balance and reason, creating a sense of perfect, human-centered beauty. So while Egypt spoke in the thunderous voice of divine authority, Greece replied with the measured poetry of human intellect. This ideological battle set the stage for an even more personal and dramatic conflict, one that would play out on the Athenian Acropolis itself. Even the sacred hill of the Acropolis was a battlefield of competing visions. While Ictinus and Callicrates were perfecting the Parthenon, a temple designed with an almost supernatural sense of harmony, another brilliant mind was reshaping the very way you entered that sacred space. Nesicles, the architect of the Propylaea, faced an immense challenge. His gateway had to be more than a door. It had to be a monumental transition from the mundane world to the divine realm of the gods. But his genius lay in his refusal to be overshadowed. Where the Parthenon was a statement of pure mathematical Doric perfection, Nesicles created something astonishingly complex. His Propylaea was a multi-level structure, a grand hall with wings, integrating the elegant Ionic order right beside the sturdy Doric columns. This was a radical departure. It was as if he declared that the entrance could be as sophisticated and visually commanding as the temple itself. This was not just a gateway, it was a rival statement. His design had to adapt to the difficult, uneven terrain and accommodate the pre-existing temple of Athena Nike perched on a bastion to the south. So he engineered an asymmetrical plan, a masterpiece of practical problem-solving that achieved its own unique grandeur. The result was a silent dialogue etched in marble. Visitors did not simply walk from a plain entrance to a magnificent temple. They experienced two competing peaks of architectural genius, each pushing the other to greater heights. This rivalry, this tension between the pure ideal and the adaptive masterpiece, is what forged the Acropolis into the breathtaking ensemble we know today. It was a contest that propelled Athenian architecture to its absolute peak, proving that competition could build more than just structures, it could build legends. From this harmonious hilltop, the pursuit of architectural supremacy would next find a home in an empire obsessed with scale and engineering dominance. Behind every great architectural rivalry was a patron holding the purse strings and the power. Picture the Roman Emperor Augustus listening to two architects passionately debate the merits of different forum designs, his final favor the ultimate prize for the winner. These powerful figures were the essential catalysts for the silent wars between builders. A pharaoh might deliberately commission multiple design teams for a single temple complex, not out of confusion, but to guarantee the most brilliant outcome through direct competition. A Roman senator would fund a magnificent new basilica not merely for public service, but to visibly outshine the project funded by his political rival across the forum. The patron's personal desires, their hunger for immortality, their need for political legitimacy, their craving for sheer spectacle, these were the forces that defined the entire terms of the architectural contest. They held absolute power over the builders, controlling not just the budget but the very possibility of a future career, or in some cases, life and death itself. This made every single design decision a high-stakes gamble. To see these ancient structures as anonymous monuments is to miss the real story. They are the direct, physical results of specific human ambitions and bitter rivalries, frozen in stone by the whims of the powerful. The very tools and techniques of construction would become the next weapons in these contests. The workshop was the architect's true battlefield. Here, the silent war was waged not with swords, but with substances and numbers. A revolutionary material could shatter all previous limits of design. The Romans understood this power perfectly. Their development of concrete was a technological leap that left their Greek predecessors far behind. Greek architecture, for all its beauty, was bound by the physical constraints of the post and lintel system, where horizontal stone beams rested on vertical columns. This method created magnificent temples, but it could never enclose a vast, open space. Roman concrete changed everything. This seemingly magical mixture of lime, volcanic ash, and rubble could be poured into wooden molds, allowing it to take any shape and harden into a mass stronger than most natural stone. It was this innovation that made the Pantheon's dome possible, a flawless hemisphere of concrete that seemed to float over the city, an architectural feat that would have been pure fantasy to the Greeks. Yet materials were only half the story. Parallel to this was a secret war of mathematics. The precise application of ratios like the golden section became a hidden weapon for achieving a sense of effortless perfection. This mathematical relationship, found throughout nature, was secretly woven into the dimensions of temples and statues, creating a subconscious harmony that the eye recognized as inherently beautiful. Possessing the formula for a stronger, faster-setting mortar or a new technique for moving 100-ton stone blocks was like holding a state secret. These were not shared in academic papers. They were the closely guarded intellectual property of a master builder and his workshop, passed from father to son or master to apprentice. This knowledge was the key to a dynasty of commissions, the decisive advantage that could win a patron's favor and humiliate a rival. This relentless arms race, a constant push between practical material science and abstract theoretical perfection, is what fundamentally shaped the skyline of the ancient world. It gave architects the tools to turn their most audacious dreams into stone and mortar, setting the stage for a final, dramatic showdown where ego and engineering would reach a breaking point. The ultimate prize in these contests was the city skyline itself. High atop its mountain, the Acropolis of Pergamon was not merely a collection of buildings, it was a deliberate, theatrical stage set for an architectural duel. Two structures in particular were locked in a silent battle for visual and symbolic dominance, a clash that defined the entire city. The Great Altar of Pergamon stood first, a monument of overwhelming emotional force. Its design was a masterclass in the Hellenistic Baroque style, a dramatic departure from the calm harmony of classical Greece. A colossal staircase, more like a theatrical ramp, led the eye upward to a sanctuary framed by a sprawling, deeply carved frieze. This frieze depicted the epic battle between the gods and the giants, a chaotic, twisting narrative of muscular figures in agonized struggle. The entire structure was engineered not for quiet contemplation, but for visceral impact to make a visitor feel the raw, tumultuous power of the kingdom that built it. It was a statement of dynamic, emotional power carved in stone. Decades later, the Temple of Trajan rose in response. Built under Roman influence, its statement was entirely different. This was not a swirling drama of emotion, but a stark, colossal assertion of imperial order. It adhered to the disciplined lines of the Corinthian order, its columns standing in severe, rational perfection. Where the altar was about the chaotic struggle for power, the temple was about the cold, established fact of it. It represented a new, global authority, one that valued immense scale and unwavering control. Walking through Pergamon, a citizen or visitor would have experienced this dialogue directly. The cityscape became a conversation, a visual argument between two competing ideologies of rule. One building shouted with theatrical passion, the other spoke with the quiet, intimidating voice of an empire. This urban one-upmanship, this race to dominate the horizon, created one of the most dramatic and intellectually charged environments of the ancient world. And it was in Rome, the ultimate imperial power, where this vertical rivalry would reach its most audacious and devastating climax. The Roman Forum was a landscape of engineered supremacy. To walk through it was to witness a city built not just for its citizens, but as a deliberate statement to the entire world. Every arch, every vaulted ceiling was a direct challenge to the architectural achievements of the past. The Greeks had perfected harmony and proportion, but Roman architects sought to conquer space itself. Their secret weapon was concrete, a material that allowed them to defy gravity in ways that left stone block construction far behind. With it, they could create vast, uninterrupted interiors like the Pantheon's dome, a space so immense it seemed to capture the very heavens. This was more than engineering, it was a calculated message of dominance. Our technology, our vision, our ability to reshape the very earth is unrivaled. Even their most practical projects were declarations of superiority. The aqueducts that marched across the countryside on towering arches were not merely plumbing. They were monumental proofs of Roman logistical genius, a visible and undeniable statement that outdid the simpler water channels of every other civilization. This drive to outperform everyone else fueled an empire-wide obsession with infrastructure, where roads, bridges, and harbors were as much about prestige as they were about function. But this culture of supremacy did more than just look outward. It bred a ferocious internal competition that would push Roman architecture to its absolute limit, and sometimes beyond. The ultimate test of this power dynamic unfolded in the court of Emperor Hadrian. He was no ordinary patron, but a man who considered himself a peer to his own architects, a brilliant amateur whose passion for design was matched only by his imperial authority. His appointed master builder was Apollodorus of Damascus, the genius behind Trajan's monumental forum and his incredible bridge across the Danube. Apollodorus was a professional of the highest order, a man who had literally moved rivers and reshaped the heart of Rome. The stage was set for an inevitable collision. The story, passed down by the historian Cassius Dio, captures the moment perfectly. Hadrian, brimming with pride over his own designs for the Temple of Venus and Roma, presented the plans to Apollodorus for his expert opinion. The master builder did not offer polite praise. He looked at the emperor's drawings and delivered a devastating professional critique. He pointed out that the seated cult statues of the goddesses were too large for their cellas, the inner chambers of the temple. If the goddesses were to somehow stand up, he quipped, they would hit their heads on the ceiling. It was more than a correction, it was a public humiliation. A mere craftsman, even the most celebrated one, had insulted the artistic vision of the most powerful man in the world. This was not a rivalry of equals, it was a dangerous game where one player held the power of life and death. The professional insult festered into a legendary feud. While historical records are sparse, the suggestion is that Hadrian eventually exiled or even executed Apollodorus. But the emperor's architectural response was even more telling. Hadrian's subsequent projects read like a direct rebuttal to his critic. He poured his energy into the Pantheon, a structure that demonstrates a profound understanding of spatial volume and dome construction, as if to prove he fully grasped the principles of scale and proportion. He then designed his sprawling villa at Tivoli, a personal universe of architectural experiments and surprises. These were not just buildings, they were a statement. Hadrian was determined to prove his own creative genius could not only match but surpass that of his exiled expert. This clash reveals the explosive potential when absolute power meets unyielding professional pride. The tension was not just between two men, but between the purity of an imperial vision and the hard, practical truths of engineering execution. It was a reminder that in these silent wars, the ultimate weapon was always the emperor's favor, a prize that could be given and taken away with a single, prideful word. Each column was a declaration in a city's silent cultural war. Stroll through any ancient site, and you are not just seeing supports for a roof, you are witnessing a fierce aesthetic rivalry frozen in stone. The Doric order stood as the first and most formidable statement. Its columns, rising directly from the floor without a fancy base, were powerfully fluted and crowned with a stark, simple capital. This was architecture stripped to its essence, a language of masculine strength and austere power that resonated deeply with militaristic societies like the Spartans. It spoke of discipline, of a community built on unwavering principles, not on decorative flourishes. Then came the Ionic response, a direct challenge to that rugged simplicity. The Ionic column, with its elegant base and the instantly recognizable scrolls, or volutes, on its capital, introduced a new note of graceful intellect. This style was born in Ionia, a center of philosophical thought and sophisticated culture. Its very form seemed to suggest that beauty and reason were intertwined, that strength could be expressed with refinement. But the competition did not stop there. The Corinthian order entered the fray as the ultimate expression of opulence. Its capital was a breathtaking explosion of carved acanthus leaves, a symbol of enduring life and lavish beauty. This was not the strength of the warrior or the grace of the philosopher, but the unmistakable voice of wealth and luxury. To choose one order over another was to make a profound statement. A Roman patron selecting the severe Doric for a temple might be aligning himself with the old republican virtues of stoicism and strength. That same man might choose the ornate Corinthian for his family's villa to broadcast his immense fortune and sophisticated taste. This stylistic battle raged in plain sight. Look at the Roman Forum, where buildings in different orders stood shoulder to shoulder, each one arguing for a different version of beauty and power. This evolution from stark Doric to graceful Ionic to lavish Corinthian was more than a trend. It was a visual debate about the very soul of a civilization. And just as the form of a building could spark rivalry, so too could its fundamental purpose. The air inside the temple was thick with more than incense. It was charged with the desperate hope of an entire city. In these sacred spaces, architecture became a direct plea to the heavens, a tangible argument for divine favor. This was not a quiet rivalry of aesthetics. It was a high-stakes theological contest where the very survival of a community was believed to hang in the balance. When one city-state constructed a grander temple for its patron deity than its neighbor, it was not merely showing off its wealth. It was making a bold theological claim, asserting that its piety was superior and therefore more deserving of the god's protection and blessings. Every architectural decision was loaded with spiritual significance. The precise alignment of an altar to catch the first ray of the solstice sun, the overwhelming height of a cult statue designed to inspire awe and fear, the intricate layout of a processional way that choreographed the movement of worshippers, all of these were innovations aimed at forging a more powerful, more direct link to the divine. The goal was to create an experience so overwhelming that it left no doubt in the worshipper's mind, or so the community hoped in the god's mind, about which city truly deserved favor. This spiritual one-upmanship did not end at the temple doors. It extended even into the silent cities of the dead, where the eternal homes of the departed became the next arena for this sacred competition. The final resting place became the ultimate architectural statement. Two tombs separated by over 2,000 years, engaged in a silent war across the centuries. In one corner stood the Pyramid of Khufu at Giza, the undisputed champion of the ancient world. It was a statement of pure, terrifying geometry, a man-made mountain whose only purpose was to project the pharaoh's divine power into eternity. Its design was brutally simple, its scale almost incomprehensible, a monument built to overwhelm the human spirit and erase any doubt about the king's godlike status. Then, in the 4th century before the Common Era, a new challenger arose. Mausoleums, a regional ruler in the Persian Empire, and his wife Artemisia commissioned a tomb that would not merely imitate the Egyptian benchmark, but consciously redefine it. Their mausoleum at Halicarnassus was not a solitary geometric form. It was a layered masterpiece, a wedding cake of architectural styles. Its base was a high, rectangular podium reminiscent of Lycian tombs. Stacked atop this was a colonnade of flawless Greek Ionic columns, and the whole structure was crowned by a steep, pyramidal roof. This was not a single statement, but a symphony, blending the monumental solidity of the East with the graceful artistry of the West. Where the pyramid used its sheer, unadorned mass to awe, the mausoleum deployed a riot of sculptural detail. Its sides were decorated with breathtaking friezes carved by the most famous Greek sculptors of the age, depicting scenes of gods and heroes and epic battles. This was a deliberate move, shifting the focus from raw, imposing scale to sophisticated artistic synthesis. It asked a profound question: what makes a monument truly timeless? Is it the ability to humble with sheer size, or the power to captivate with beauty and complexity? The mausoleum's very name, which entered the language to describe any grand tomb, signifies its victory in this long-distance rivalry. It proved that legacy could be built not just with mass, but with artistry, creating a new paradigm for funerary glory that resonated through the ages. This deep-seated human need to be remembered did not end with the tomb's completion. It echoed through the very materials used to build it. A brilliant blueprint was a declaration of war on logistics. While architects dueled with designs in royal courts, a far larger and more grueling conflict was underway in quarry pits and on treacherous transport routes. This was the silent war of supply, a brutal competition for resources that could make or break an empire's grandest statement. Securing the pure white marble from the quarries at Penteli was not just a purchase, it was a geopolitical maneuver, guaranteeing that the Parthenon would gleam with a quality no rival city could easily match. Similarly, the Roman obsession with Carrara marble was a calculated choice, its flawless white stone becoming a visible symbol of imperial power across the Mediterranean. Possessing the finest stone was only the first battle. The true test was moving it. Imagine the monumental effort of shifting a 100-ton obelisk from its quarry, loading it onto a specially built barge, and sailing it across the sea, only to then drag it for miles overland to its final destination. This was not brute force, it was physics and ingenuity on a colossal scale. Engineers developed systems of wooden sledges, lubricated with water or fat, pulled by teams of hundreds along carefully prepared roads. They constructed massive wooden cranes and lifting devices, their groaning timbers testament to the immense weights being hoisted into place. The architect's vision was entirely dependent on this hidden army of laborers and the engineers who directed them. Managing a workforce of thousands, housing them, feeding them, and organizing their specialized tasks from quarryman to master carver was an administrative miracle. This logistical genius was the invisible foundation of every great monument. A city could have the most ambitious design in the world, but without the organizational muscle to command the mountains and the seas, that design remained a fantasy. This relentless drive to master the physical world would find its ultimate expression in the heart of an empire determined to build the perfect capital. The straight line became a revolutionary statement. Hippodamus of Miletus did not just design streets, he designed a new way of thinking about society itself. His rigid grid system, a perfect network of right angles, was a direct assault on the ancient, winding alleys of organically grown cities. For centuries, towns had expanded like living things, their paths following old animal trails, the contours of hills, or the haphazard placement of wells and shrines. This created an intimate, often confusing maze that felt deeply human in its complexity. Hippodamus saw this not as charming, but as chaotic and inefficient. His vision was one of absolute rational order. He proposed dividing the entire city into specialized districts, a clear separation of public spaces, private homes, and sacred ground. This was architecture as social engineering, a physical blueprint for a well-ordered community where every citizen knew their place, literally and figuratively. The adoption of his plan for the port of Piraeus and the city of Rhodes was a monumental victory for this new ideology. It was a declaration that human reason could impose a superior order upon the messy reality of life. Walking from the tangled, ancient quarter of a city into a new Hippodamian grid must have felt like stepping from one world into another, from the realm of instinct into the domain of logic. This grand rivalry over the city's skeleton was mirrored in the very homes where its most powerful citizens lived. Even the private villa was a battlefield for status. When a wealthy Roman senator returned from a governorship in Greece or Egypt, he did not simply build a comfortable country home, he commissioned a manifesto. His sprawling villa in the Campanian countryside was designed with a single, unspoken goal: to render his neighbor's estate embarrassingly outdated. This was a silent war fought not with public arches but with private luxuries, a competition where every detail from the floor to the ceiling was a calculated move. The most cutting-edge innovation was the hypocaust system, an ingenious network of raised floors and hollow walls through which hot air from a furnace would circulate, bathing the entire room in luxurious, even heat. To have this when your rival shivered through a drafty winter was a profound victory. The floors themselves were canvases for one-upmanship, intricate mosaic scenes composed of thousands of tiny colored stones called tesserae, depicted everything from mythological battles to intricate geometric patterns. A newly fashionable design, perhaps a Nilotic scene with exotic crocodiles and pygmies brought back from the Nile, could instantly make a neighbor's older, simpler mosaics look provincial. The gardens were another critical front. They were not wild meadows but engineered landscapes, complex outdoor rooms featuring imported statues, elaborate fountains powered by sophisticated hydraulics, and even collections of rare trees and animals. The entire layout of the villa was a strategic game. The main reception room, the triclinium, was meticulously positioned to capture the afternoon sun, bathing dinner guests in a flattering golden light and showcasing the owner's understanding of solar alignment. The quality of the frescoes on the walls, whether they were simple red panels or elaborate architectural illusions that made a small room feel like a grand colonnade opening onto a fantasy city, spoke volumes about the owner's taste and the depth of his purse. These homes were three-dimensional resumes broadcasting their owners' worldliness, technological sophistication, and cultural refinement. This relentless domestic arms race, however, pushed architects and their patrons to take ever greater risks. The desire for the unprecedented could lead to spectacular innovations or to equally spectacular and very public collapses. That shadow of failure, however, was a constant companion to ambition. For every masterpiece that has stood the test of time, countless others succumbed to their own grand designs, their stories now buried in the rubble. The pressure to outdo a rival could push an architect to make a fatal gamble. A single miscalculation in a foundation or an untested roof span that turned a triumph into a tragedy. We see whispers of these disasters across the ancient world. In Rome, the historian Tacitus records the collapse of a poorly built amphitheater in the town of Phidne, a catastrophe that killed thousands. The blame was laid on a rushed construction and substandard foundations, a clear case where the desire for spectacle brutally overrode sound engineering. Even the great lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the Seven Wonders, did not escape the ravages of time and perhaps structural flaws, eventually succumbing to a series of earthquakes. These were not mere accidents. They were the direct consequences of a culture that prized speed and spectacle, where the glory of completion could overshadow the meticulous and often invisible work of ensuring stability. An architect who failed so publicly did not just lose a commission. His reputation was shattered, his workshop disbanded, his name remembered only for its association with catastrophe. The financial cost could bankrupt a city or a wealthy patron, while the human cost, the lives of the laborers and craftsmen lost in the collapse, was a grim and often unrecorded toll. This was the ultimate risk in the silent war, a reminder that the forces of gravity and physics were rivals that never accepted a bribe and never lost a fight. Yet, paradoxically, these very failures became the foundation for future success. Each collapse was a brutal, unforgettable lesson in material limits and load-bearing principles. The cracked arch, the shattered column, the subsided foundation, they all spoke a clear language of what not to do. This hard-won knowledge, paid for in stone and lives, was then incorporated into the next generation of building manuals and workshop traditions, ensuring that the same mistake would not be made twice. The fallen monument taught the ones that would follow how to stand. A Roman aqueduct was never just a water pipe. It was a permanent advertisement for an empire's total dominance. Earlier civilizations had managed water, but the Romans waged a systematic campaign against the very limitations of nature itself. Look at the Assyrians with their modest stone channels, or the Greeks with their simple tunnels. The Romans studied these predecessors only to render them utterly obsolete. Their goal was not merely to supply water, but to do so with an overwhelming display of logistical power that no rival culture could hope to match. This was a cold, calculated, and institutional rivalry fought not between two men, but between Roman engineering and every civilization that had come before. Each new aqueduct was a direct challenge to the past, designed to be longer, to leap across wider valleys on higher arches, and to maintain a more precise, gravity-driven flow over impossible distances. The Pont du Gard in southern France stands as the ultimate proof of this ambition. It is not a single layer of arches but a colossal three-story bridge, a stacked masterpiece of stone that carries a water channel at its peak. Its sheer verticality is a declaration. Where earlier aqueducts hugged the landscape, the Roman version conquered it, striding across a river valley with an elegance that belied its brutal strength. This was infrastructure as a triumphal monument, a structure so magnificent that its functional purpose was inseparable from its message of superiority. What force could drive an empire to invest such staggering resources into moving water? It was the desire to make Roman urban life visibly, undeniably superior to any other. A city with constant, clean running water for its public baths, its fountains, and its sewers was not just more comfortable, it was a living testament to a system of governance and engineering that commanded the world. This relentless drive for hydraulic perfection created a network of rivals stretching across the empire, each new aqueduct trying to outdo the last in a silent, collective competition that defined Roman ambition for centuries. A master builder's most valuable possession was not his set of drafting tools, but the secret formulas locked inside his mind. These were the closely guarded treasures of the architectural guilds, closed societies that operated like intellectual fortresses. Within these family dynasties and master-led workshops, the most powerful knowledge was transmitted in hushed tones from an experienced expert to a carefully chosen student. The sacred rules of proportion, the exact mixture for a concrete that would set underwater, the mathematical trick for perfectly aligning a colossal structure, these were not written down in books. They were living secrets passed along a human chain, and their protection was a matter of professional survival. A guild's entire reputation and economic power rested on possessing a technique that no one else could replicate. This created a fierce, underground economy of espionage. The historical record whispers of architects being lured from one city-state to another with extravagant salaries and promises of unparalleled prestige. When such a man changed allegiance, he did not arrive empty-handed. He brought the intellectual property of his former master, a treasure trove of competitive advantages that could elevate his new patron's projects and humiliate his old one. This was considered a legitimate, if ruthless, tactic. Far darker were the acts of outright theft. Imagine a rival's agent bribing a night watchman at a worksite to get a single, fleeting look at the foundational plans. Or consider the silent sabotage of a carefully laid foundation, a subtle shift that would cause a wall to crack months later, discrediting the lead builder and opening the door for a competitor to take over the commission. This clandestine war over blueprints and formulas, fought in the shadows of the quarries and scaffolding, had a paradoxical result. While it was born from jealousy and fierce competition, it became an unexpected engine for the spread of innovation. A brilliant idea, no matter how well guarded, could not be contained forever. It would leak, be stolen, and be reinvented in a new city, ensuring that the architectural revolution continued, not through open collaboration, but through a relentless, underground current of rivalrous ambition. The patron who understood this, who could master the flow of this secret knowledge, held the real power to shape the skyline. An emperor's private dream could become a public nightmare. Nero did not merely commission architects, he absorbed them, turning the brilliant minds of Severus and Sulla into instruments for his own unrestrained imagination. The Domus Aurea, his golden house, was not a palace in the city, but a city within the palace, a sprawling personal domain that seized vast tracts of Rome after the Great Fire. This was the ultimate perversion of the patron-architect relationship. The rivalry was no longer between two builders, but between one man's ego and the collective identity of an entire populace. His architects were forced to engineer marvels that served as insults. They designed a 120-foot-tall bronze statue of Nero himself, the Colossus, looming over the sacred entrance to the city. They built a circular dining room with a revolving ceiling that mimicked the motions of the heavens, a feat of engineering that symbolized an emperor who believed the universe itself should revolve around his whims. Most brazen of all, they sculpted pastoral landscapes and artificial lakes where the homes of thousands of Romans had once stood. Every technological triumph was a slap in the face to tradition. The Roman people valued public works that served the community, like aqueducts and forums, not a private pleasure garden that consumed their urban space. The Domus Aurea was a declaration that the emperor was no longer the first citizen, but a god-king who treated Rome as his personal canvas. The backlash was inevitable and total. After Nero's fall, his successors engaged in a systematic campaign of architectural damnatio memoriae. They drained his lakes to lay the foundations for the Flavian amphitheater, the Colosseum, a building dedicated to public spectacle. They built the baths of Titus over his pavilions, replacing private luxury with public hygiene and leisure. The message was unmistakable. The only proper response to an architecture of tyranny was an architecture for the people. This dramatic reversal proved that while a single ruler could temporarily bend the city to his will, the enduring spirit of Rome would always reclaim its stones for the common good. That roar in the Colosseum was the sound of a city feeding on competition, and the building itself was the ultimate prize in a high-stakes architectural game. Before its massive stone ellipse rose over Rome, amphitheaters were often temporary wooden structures, hastily erected and just as quickly dismantled after the games. The Flavian dynasty's decision to build the Colosseum in stone was a masterstroke of political theater. It was a direct repudiation of Nero's selfish Domus Aurea, a statement that this new regime would build not for a single emperor's vanity, but for the people's pleasure. This was not just a new venue, it was a new ideology carved in travertine. Its very existence challenged every major city across the empire. Could your city host games on this scale? Did you have the wealth, the engineering skill, and the political will to create a permanent home for such spectacles? A wave of construction began, from the great amphitheater in Pozzuoli to the one in Verona, each a local attempt to capture a piece of Rome's glory. The competition was measured in precise, brutal metrics. How many thousands could you seat, and how quickly could you empty them? The invention of the vomitorium, those remarkable passageways that could spew forth a crowd in minutes, was not just about convenience, it was a boast of logistical genius. The true marvel, however, lay hidden beneath the sand. The hypogeum, that sprawling underground world of tunnels, cages, and elevators, was the amphitheater's secret engine. A complex one was a mark of supreme sophistication, a statement that your city could stage managed death and drama with seamless, terrifying efficiency. The quality of your games depended on the complexity of your basement. So when a provincial governor inaugurated his city's new arena, he was not just celebrating a building. He was entering his community into an empire-wide contest for status, proving that his city was a true miniature Rome. The sand of the arena reflected a society that competed in everything, even in the design of the stages where they competed. The silent war for architectural glory eventually moved indoors, into the hushed halls where knowledge itself was the ultimate treasure. While emperors competed with domes and colonnades, two dynasties waged a far more cerebral battle to possess the entire known world. The Library of Alexandria was the first true wonder of the intellect, a repository of scrolls so vast its very existence became a legend. Its affiliated museum was not a quiet study hall but a vibrant research institution, a state-funded think tank where the greatest minds were paid to think, debate, and discover. This concentration of genius was an unparalleled declaration of cultural supremacy, a statement that Egypt was the true custodian of human civilization. But a challenger arose in the powerful Attalid kingdom of Pergamon. Its rulers looked at Alexandria's dominance and resolved to build a rival, a library that would not just emulate but surpass the original. This was a head-to-head competition for the title of the world's brain. The Ptolemies in Egypt, growing wary of this upstart, did not respond with a grander building. They launched a piece of economic sabotage so effective it changed the course of history. They allegedly banned the export of papyrus, the essential paper of the ancient world, intending to strangle Pergamon's ability to copy and expand its collection. It was a brilliant, cutthroat move in their silent war. Deprived of the raw material for scrolls, the librarians and craftsmen of Pergamon were forced to innovate. They turned to an older, more durable medium, animal skins, and refined its production to an art form. They developed a process of soaking, stretching, and scouring the hides of calves, sheep, and goats, creating a smooth, strong, flexible writing surface that could be used on both sides. This new material was called Pergamna Charta, or parchment, named for the city that perfected it out of sheer necessity. The irony is profound. An act of cultural blockade designed to cripple a rival, instead gifted humanity with a revolutionary information technology. Parchment was far more durable than fragile papyrus. It could be produced anywhere there were animals, and it could be bound into the codex, the direct ancestor of the modern book. This rivalry between two architectural complexes, two storehouses of knowledge, did more than just fill shelves with scrolls. It fundamentally altered the very vessel of thought, proving that the drive to outbuild a competitor could echo through the ages in the most unexpected ways. For every name etched in stone by victory, countless others were erased by the quiet catastrophe of defeat. The story of ancient architecture is not only a chronicle of what was built, but a vast archive of what was lost, rejected, or simply never attempted. Consider the architect who presented a revolutionary design for a temple, only to have a conservative patron choose a safer, traditional plan. His blueprint was shelved, his vision fading on a scrap of papyrus. Yet that radical idea, that spark of genius, did not simply vanish. It circulated among apprentices, was discussed in workshops, and perhaps decades later, resurfaced in a modified form in a different city, influencing a masterpiece we admire today. Failure was a harsh but effective teacher. The collapse of an ambitious arch, the slow subsidence of a foundation laid on unstable ground, these were public and costly lessons. But each disaster taught a fundamental principle of physics and material science, knowledge that was then woven into the fabric of the next great project, preventing the same mistake from being made twice. We can see this most poignantly in the ruins of a city like Carthage. After its brutal defeat by Rome, the victorious city was systematically razed. For centuries, the architectural language of the Carthaginians was silenced, their urban planning and temple designs lost. Yet, through archaeology, we are slowly recovering their whispers. We learn that their city layout, their harbor engineering, their domestic architecture, all represented a different path, a road not taken in the mainstream narrative of Western design. These shadows are essential. They remind us that history is not a straight line of progress, but a tangled bush of possibilities. By studying the styles that fell out of favor and the political patrons who were toppled, we understand that the evolution of architecture was a messy, contested process, full of dead ends and forgotten alternatives. The legacy of these silent defeats is a more honest, more complex, and ultimately more human story. And at the very heart of this millennia-long struggle, beneath all the political maneuvering and technical innovation, lay the most personal driver of all, the raw human hunger to be remembered. A name could become as immortal as the stone itself. For every anonymous hand that lifted a block into place, a select few architects transcended their role as mere builders to become legends. Imhotep, the visionary behind the step pyramid, was not just remembered, he was deified. worshipped as a god of wisdom and medicine centuries after his death. Apollodorus of Damascus, though he fell from an emperor's grace, secured his place in history through the sheer audacity of his engineering. Their identities fused with their creations, proving that the most permanent victory in these silent wars was the etching of a name into the collective memory of civilization. This was the true prize, the deep-seated motivation behind every daring design and every risky innovation. To win a royal commission was to be handed the chisel with which you could carve your own biography for the ages. Each structure was a complex argument in stone, a testament not only to a patron's power but to the architect's own genius in overcoming gravity, tradition, and rival visionaries. The Great Pyramid does not simply whisper the name of a pharaoh, it shouts the organizational genius of its unknown master builder. The Parthenon is as much a monument to the mathematical harmony pursued by Ictinus and Callicrates as it is to the goddess Athena. This rivalry against other architects was at its core a shared front in a much larger war, the universal human struggle against time and oblivion. They were all racing against the erosion of memory, using stone and mortar to build a fortress against forgetfulness. Their legacy is not just in the ruins we admire, but in the undeniable truth they left behind, that competition, for all its tensions and dangers, was a relentless catalyst for human achievement, pushing the boundaries of art, science, and what we believe is possible. That fossil record of creative tension is a testament to a profound truth, that rivalry built the ancient world as much as collaboration did. The relentless pressure to outperform a competitor, whether it was a neighboring city-state or a fellow builder in the royal court, acted as a relentless engine for human ingenuity. It forced architects and engineers to think beyond established conventions, to solve problems that had never been solved before. This was not a gentle process of academic debate. It was a high-stakes race for survival and glory, and it pushed the very limits of material science and artistic expression. The result was an accelerated evolution of design. The Greeks refined the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian orders in a stylistic arms race, each new style emerging as a conscious response to the perceived limitations of the last. The Romans, driven by a need to assert their dominance over the Greeks and all who came before, perfected concrete and the arch, technologies that allowed them to enclose space on a scale that was previously unimaginable. Without the silent war between Hadrian and Apollodorus, would the Pantheon's sublime dome have reached such perfection? The competitive spirit created a dynamic, almost Darwinian environment where the most robust and brilliant ideas were the ones that survived and were replicated across generations. The ancient skyline is not a serene collection of isolated masterpieces. It is a conversation, sometimes a shouting match, frozen in stone. This legacy compels us to look at our own world differently. In our modern pursuits of art, science, and technology, do we embrace the constructive friction of competition, or do we shy away from its pressures? The great monuments of the past stand as a powerful argument that the drive to surpass a rival can be one of humanity's most potent creative forces. We have journeyed across the silent, stony battlefields where the greatest minds of antiquity waged war with compass and T-square. From the royal court of Joza, where Imhotep first dared to build in stone, to the Athenian Acropolis, where Nesicles challenged the perfection of the Parthenon with his own gateway, we have witnessed a truth. These rivalries were not petty squabbles. They were the very engine of human progress, the crucible in which our most enduring achievements were forged. Each clash of ego and intellect, from the ideological duel between Egypt and Greece to the fatal feud between Hadrian and Apollodorus, forced architects to push further, to build smarter, and to dream bigger. They shaped our fundamental understanding of beauty, power, and innovation, leaving a legacy carved not only in limestone and marble, but into the DNA of our cities and the core of our own ambitions. So the next time you stand before an ancient monument, do not just see a silent ruin. Listen closely. You might just hear the echoes of a forgotten argument, the ghost of a blueprint that was never built, the whispers of a silent war that gave it form. Let this hidden history inspire you. Channel your own competitive spirit, not toward destruction, but toward creation. Build something, whether an idea, a community, or a work of art that is lasting and meaningful. If these silent wars of genius have captivated you, subscribe for more journeys into history's deepest mysteries. We would love to hear which ancient rivalry fascinates you most in the comments below.